Final Fantasy XVI was one of my most hyped games of the year, and after wrapping up the 40-hour campaign and trying all the different types of side content, I can confidently say it absolutely delivers. From the gripping and epic story, the amazing and complex cast of allies and villains, and of course the satisfying and flashy combat system, this game is an absolute must-have in my book. It's really massive, and I don't want to give away anything major, which is why you will only see footage from very early parts of the story and gameplay with just a few of Clive's many powers unlocked. To get you up to speed for if you haven't played the excellent free demo yet, we play as Clive Rosfield, who is part of the royal family of Rosaria. That's just one of the kingdoms fighting for control over the massive mother crystals to supply their populace with magic. A blight is also draining parts of the land of both life and magic, so while there are some alliances and treaties, most kingdoms are desperate to expand and fight over these precious resources. Key part in this war are dominants, people who can draw on the power of the godlike icons to become like gods themselves. This pressure cooker of a situation sets the stage for war, betrayal and unlikely alliances in a way that will remind a lot of people of the earlier seasons of Game of Thrones. And much like that show, the story doesn't shy away from mature themes either. And I don't mean the fact that our Final Fantasy protagonist now uses curse words. It's the themes that the game handles, like the discrimination of magic users or the consequences of war on the people of a country, as well as some absolutely despicable villains. It's those themes and characters that give this beautiful looking world some very dark and gritty shades. It's very different from Final Fantasy VII Remake, but that is of course the beauty of the Final Fantasy series. While some themes and elements are similar, the main entries are all standalone, so no prior knowledge is needed to jump into and enjoy Final Fantasy XVI. If you ever get lost during the story, there's even an amazing feature that lets you pause a cutscene to read up on some lore entries relevant for what is currently going on. All of this is beautifully brought to life thanks to excellent voice acting and an amazing soundtrack that especially helps to elevate the incredible boss fights to a whole new level. It's a very cinematic experience with tons and tons of beautiful cutscenes that make you feel like you're watching an epic fantasy movie or show rather than playing a game. That is until Clive draws his sword and you're pulled back into the amazing combat, of course, but it has to be said that the production value on the cutscenes is insane, especially given how many there are. If you have played the demo, which you should totally check out if you haven't by the way, you'll probably recognize a lot of what I just mentioned. Rest assured, that quality is maintained throughout the rest of the game, and after finishing the whole thing, I can only tell you that that was just the tip of the iceberg. And that goes for all parts of the game, but if you'd ask me to pick one highlight, it's easily the boss battles. I'm actually going to steal a quote from Jordan, who put it perfectly and said that every boss in this game feels like it could be the final boss for another game. The icon fights in specific will blow your mind and leave you wondering how the game can possibly top it, only to have the bar to be raised even higher by the next one. Some of these are up there with some of the most insane things I have ever seen in a video game. The design of the bosses and the visual effects are just beautiful to look at. They're all really fun and varied to fight too. Just when you've picked up on all the different attack patterns, they start adding brand new attacks mid-fight to keep you on your toes. The production value also shines during the special cinematic dodges, clashes and attacks that are always unique and make every fight even more memorable. The regular enemy variety is also one of the best I have ever seen in a game, as you're constantly introduced to new creatures and soldiers. There are a lot of unique mini bosses too, and even when they show up for a second time way later into the game, they will have a new set of moves or mechanics to make it feel like a new fight altogether. Next to fighting dangerous creatures, you'll also spend a lot of time exploring the various kingdoms of Valisthea. Final Fantasy XVI has a semi-open world structure similar in a way to God of War and its sequel with their realms. Instead of realms, you have different kingdoms you can travel to, each with a decently sized map to explore. Here you will find new enemies to take out, materials and chests by going off the beaten path, and villagers and other NPCs asking for your help. These are usually very simple side quests that have you kill, collect or deliver something, but they're still interesting as they reveal more about the world and what a day in the life of a regular citizen looks like. The game will open up even more later on with a hunt board where you can go after particularly dangerous targets that reward you with unique materials needed to craft some of the more powerful items in the game. Even after finishing the campaign, some of these hunt bosses still gave me a run for my money, so you'll find plenty of challenge here. Most things you do also earn you value Renown, which grants you new rewards when you hit certain milestones, so you're always working towards a nice new reward. There are even some secrets you can find out exploring, like this challenge stone that has you complete a time challenge with only a single icon skill set. Clive already starts the game with a wide array of sword attacks to close the gap to an enemy, launch them in the air, or slam them down from the sky. Dodges are super satisfying to pull off, and there's also a very unique parry system that instead of timing a block, has you countering an enemy attack by performing an attack of your own at just the right time. I have to admit it took some getting used to, but once I did, it felt really good to pull off. There's also a really fun combo mechanic where you can alternate sword hits with magic cast that requires a bit of timing for extra damage. So while it might not seem that in depth at first, there is a lot you can do to spice up the many battles with your sword skills alone. And I haven't even touched on the most important part of combat yet. Before I do though, if you enjoyed the review so far, be sure to leave a like and subscribe, as we got way more spoiler-free Final Fantasy 16 tips, tricks and more coming your way. So while Clive is a very capable swordsman, the star of the show are his iconic abilities. As I already mentioned, icons are these godlike creatures that command power over elements like earth, wind and fire, and Clive gets access to the powers of various icons over the course of the game. Each one has a unique gameplay mechanic that's tied to the circle button, like the dash forward for Phoenix or the ability to pull enemies closer with Garuda. While those examples might seem pretty straightforward, the later icons really add some unique twists, but I'll let you discover those for yourself. There are also 2 ability slots per icon that allow you to perform extra powerful attacks that work on a cooldown. There are 4 abilities to unlock for each different stance, and some of the more expensive ones are absolutely insane. Like this Garuda ability that just drops a tornado on the battlefield, which will suck enemies in if they get too close. The downside of this system, if you want to call it that, is that you can only have 3 different icons to quick swap between in combat with the L2 button. It's honestly really hard to pick just 3, as each of them offer very powerful but very different abilities. The balancing here is really good. It's something the team said in previews was done on purpose to have players choose their own playstyle rather than having one that's clearly the best. I think they nailed it, as my final selection really came down to what I prefer to have in my arsenal, because there is no option that is clearly the strongest. Some enemies might challenge you to change up your selection though, as taking down flying targets for instance is much easier if you have the ability to close the gap with Phoenix or Garuda. Although when it comes to the abilities, you can upgrade them to use them in combination with any icon, so there are a lot of possibilities. And since I know this has been an issue with most games that launched recently, I also wanted to mention that Final Fantasy 16's performance is very solid. There are some slight frame drops in more crowded areas like cities, but they did not impact my enjoyment at all and are nowhere near as bad as other recent releases like Jedi Survivor. Most, if not all, combat encounters are at a silky smooth 60 frames if you play on the frame rate mode, and I did not encounter a bug or crash once during my entire playthrough. So even though there is a day one patch that's only there to make a great game even better and not to fix a major issue. The only issue I think some people might have with the game is that it's a bit too easy. There are 2 difficulties, but the only difference is that one of them, called story focused, auto-equips a couple of accessories that make things like dodging or performing combos easier. I played on action focused, which is the one that starts without these equipped, and only really found myself dying a couple of times during later boss fights. Checkpoints are pretty forgiving, as there are some mid-boss fight ones, so you don't have to redo the entire thing. There is a more challenging mode that unlocks after finishing the game, but it would have been nice to have more options at the start. Personally though, I don't think it impacted my enjoyment at all. In fact, it gave me more confidence to experiment with my different moves and abilities. While it is an action game in which your reflexes matter, not everything has to be a Dark Souls, and I constantly felt like a badass when in combat. I could keep going on about how amazing I think the game is for much longer, but I think I covered the most important reasons why you should be excited to play it. Final Fantasy 16 is one of those rare experiences where after putting down the controller after the credits, you want to forget all about it and experience it for the first time again. But until someone finds out how to do that, you can already jump into New Game Plus at launch, which increases the level cap, changes up enemy encounters, and has a very powerful new weapon to craft to help you on your journey. There's also a way to replay most story chapters, and even an arcade mode that has you run these chapters with scoring and level restrictions to get the high score on leaderboards. So a lot of replayability on top of the huge story and the tons of side quests and activities your first playthrough already offers. Photo mode is here at launch too, so I really feel like you get your money's worth with everything that's available at launch here. If you're picking up the game as well, then be sure to subscribe to the channel as we got tons of spoiler-free tips and tricks coming your way. If one of those is already up, you can watch it by clicking on the screen, and don't forget to leave a like on the video. I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.